Core. The core, right? Okay. So, just a quick review. Right, you grab the lights. Hey guys. Okay, so if we're looking at plywood, we talked about, once this forms up, the inside layers, which is the core. Okay, so the core is basically what makes up the plywood strength, what gives it its durability and its property to not warp. So again, that's one of the benefits of working with plywood is that you can end up warping. Josh, want to put your?
Oh no, it's in us.
Correct. So for the plywood, it's not going to warp. Do we ever end up, or not as much, very little, if any? Do we ever plain plywood?
No.
No, why not?
Because it's all the layers.
It's all chips, which means that it's all the layers go different directions.
Hello. What are you doing here?
Okay. All right. So we don't plain plywood because it has different. The layers themselves alternate direction. Okay. So this, you can tell these different layers right here. Like if we look at this one, depending on which way they started, the grain direction either goes, across, kind of across the grain for the veneer. Then the other one will go with the grain, across, with, across. So basically, that crisscross pattern that each layer changes 90 degrees, that's what ends up giving it its strength. Okay. So we have, this is the core right here. If we want to buy a little bit different, if we want a little bit thicker plywood or thinner plywood, you end up buying it in that thickness. Okay. So again, the only dimensions that we deal with plywood is width and then length. What was this outside?
Veneer.
Veneer, right? So you want to be careful that when you end up, whenever you're sanding with it or working with it, Corey won't pick it up, that you don't sand through the veneer, because then you're going to find basically this ugly core, right? Okay, so there's our plywood. This other part right here, does anyone know what this is called? OSB. OSB, do you know what it stands for?
Out of disordered weight.
Not out of disordered wood. If you go back right here, orientated strand board. Okay? Right there. So that's what OSB stands for. And if you notice from this picture, okay, all it is basically those are those chips. You end up throwing it through a big pencil grinder basically. It chops it all up and then you end up laying it flat. And this again ends up giving it that strength because you can see all the grain direction all over the place, okay, things like that. What would this sort of material be used?
Construction.
Construction, right? For either your roof sheathing or your subfloors or the wall sheathing on the outside, okay? The reason being is, does this have a veneer on it?
No.
No, okay? So it's cheaper, it doesn't have a veneer, it's gonna get covered up with the nicer material anyways. So basically all you're looking for this on this board is, or on this material, is basically its strength and its properties. Okay. Another thing that I want to make you guys aware of is this is called press board, which is basically they take even smaller chips of these, basically almost like a powder. Probably the biggest chunks they have is about 1/4 inch maybe, and they basically just press it all together. Has anyone ever worked with this? Well, what did you think of it when what were you working with it? I can't remember. Okay. If you look on the,
I use it usually like making like the furniture like computer areas.
Yeah.
It's nice and fine, but yet strong. And it helps your power.
Yep. So, yeah, that's what these tables are made out of here. So The downside with working with this is since you don't have the actual grain of the board, you actually have just the powder. There's one of the tables here, I think it's that one. That's why part of the reason why we don't sit on it is since it doesn't have the grain, doesn't necessarily have the complete strength of actual plywood, and it makes it really easy to actually strip out the screws or rip them out. So when you're actually like screwing into this, okay, first off you want to pre-drill, which we'll talk about that later. You want to pre-drill, but then if you over tighten it, you actually strip it out, and then you have to end up re-drilling in a different spot. Another downside, like Josh said, is that with furniture, if you guys ever go to college dorms, they have a lot of their newer furniture is made out of this press board or particle board, and over time the shells will actually start to sag, and you can see like this stuff right here. This is thicker, this is about 1 inch thick, but these bookshelves, I mean, the weight of this book over time will eventually start to sag. If you guys go in even Z's room, she has all those paper that's on there, and you can end up seeing that they're all the weight. It's how long of a distance it spans and how thin it is. It's actually starting to sag.
Yeah, I noticed they're also used for like if you go to chairs, chairs like in the kitchen or something. Underneath the cushion there's a computer board right there that holds it into place.
Yeah. Yep. So it's a nice material because it makes use of everything. However, it does, just like any other material, you have some downsides with it. The last thing that I want to talk about is masonite. And what this is basically, this is kind of like press board, it's a little bit harder. The only thing that it's used for is you can tell when it's masonite because it has this flat or smooth surface on, and that's actually your finished side. The underside, which is basically this piece, so these are two separate pieces, you have sort of that fuzzy backing part, okay? Has anyone seen where this is? Clipboards. Like clipboards, yep. That's, guys, that's made out of this masonite, but also as well as a lot of drawers. The drawer bottoms of projects are made out of that, as well as like the backs of cabinets. So if you ever look at, again, like any computer desks or anything like that, the back where those punch outs are, that's also made out of particle board. Okay? The one thing that I want to talk about, another thing today, is the grading system. Okay? So for grade, that's how you tell what quality the plywood is. So, like how nails use the penny system, plywood uses the grade system. Okay, so basically an A, B, C, or D. If you had to guess, which one is better, A or B? A, right? So A quality is the best one. We're not going to go into, this would qualify as an A, this would qualify as a C or a D. All I want you to know that the higher the letter, so like an A, that's your best quality. Once you start getting down to D, okay, you can see that you have these big knots in there, some cracks, some splitting. They even go so far as the joints. So again, that when you make that veneer, all it is basically taking the tree and unrolling it. So how noticeable are the joints, things like that. The glue job, basically the overall quality. So what I want you guys to take away from this is that you have your just a simple letter system, A being the best, D, which is lower, that's of lower quality. Are there any questions on that? All right.